Hello horror fans, my name is NomadBot and welcome to the Horror Light Podcast, where we discuss horror in all shapes and forms. From scary stories to video games and everything in between. Today's topic is all about scary stories. What makes a scary story? A scary story is defined as something that is said or written to make people feel frightened and think that a situation is much more unpleasant or dangerous than it really is. So today we'll be reading a scary story from Reddit user UK Avazana. This is The Tattoo. Brian woke up in a daze. His eyes felt heavy and his body heavier. He couldn't fully remember his adventures through the night or why his arm stung greatly, but he remembered why, or at least how it started. Alcohol. Alcohol was the culprit. No. He was the culprit. Alcohol had just been the fuel for his wild night. It all started at the bar. The bar across town that was always below the standards of most, but Brian felt it was perfect. Dingy and dirty. Decrepit and stinky, but more importantly, silent and as crowded as a Chick-fil-A on a Sunday. Brian wasn't exactly a people person and would easily lose his temper on pretty much anybody he deemed stupid. Well, he didn't hate mentally challenged people or people that just didn't know things because they had never learned them. No. He hated the people with brains and smarts that went to school and had normal jobs but still don't know how to use a parking signal or say excuse me when pushing past him. People who didn't think things through before asking an obviously stupid question or stupid enough to think they know something when they don't. It was in this bar or place like this that he found enough solace to keep moving on. But the previous night was rough. Not only had his girlfriend cheated on him, but she also revealed she had been for a long time. Brian wasn't rich by any means but was a businessman and had a decent salary. His girlfriend must have seen this and figured she could just leech off of him and it would work. It must have because she was where she wanted to be and he was left broken. Now he felt so stupid and foolish. Tie is what made him drink. Drink heavier than he had ever drunk and he left the bar in a drunken fit. The world spun and tipped, twisted and swirled, like he'd been forced to wear those drunk goggles and thrown inside of one of those twisted hallways in a haunted house attraction. He had wandered into an even or dilapidated part of town, seeing large brick walls with graffiti sprayed onto their surface and large groups of homeless people camped out in lots or standing around barrels of fire in them. None of them tried to rob him or even talk to him. He seemed like a passing leaf being blown on the ground or an ant, so small and worthless. This hadn't surprised him. What did, however, was small, yet lively building lit up and open. Nothing should have been open this late. Tattoo, it read in large neon lights, almost blindingly in his drunken haze, but it intrigued him, so he began to approach it. Somewhere in the back of his mind, there was a voice saying,
"Hey man, this is a bad idea. You're drunk. Find a safe way home and go jump into your nice warm bed."
But no. His much louder, easier to hear inebriated voice said,
"What tattoo parlor? Fuck it, let's go get a tattoo. A badass one to boot. Then we can show that bitch what she's missing."
And that's where it went wrong. The one bad decision that changed his entire life forever. The kind of decision that only the people he hated made. This had no common sense. He was nearing the glass door when he heard a cackle coming from across the street at him. Some old hag, looking just shy of what he guessed to be 80 pounds or so, and with the smile of a crack addict, teeth gnarled and yellow with half of them missing.
"What the hell you laughing at?" "Ha."
Brian said, slowly blinking his eyes out of sync with one another. Frantically and chaotically, she started chanting as she pointed a finger toward the polar over her barrel fire.
"The artist is calling. His needle is sharp. He'll leave you with his deadly mark. It won't come at first, not within a day. But in a week, you'll feel the decay. They come and they leave, but all they deceived. The art will devour, leech and consume. And when the artist returns, he'll seal your doom."
Brian's adult brain couldn't fully process it and he just scoffed and laughed back. He shook his head in disbelief of the crazy woman and opened the parlor doors. Inside, Brian saw multiple swiveling chairs along with a front desk and walls filled with pre-made tattoos and illustrations. All seemed blurry, so he didn't pay too much attention to the details, but he spotted a lone man standing near one of the chairs, beckoning him over. Like the parlor, Brian couldn't remember many details of the man, except for the fact he wore a mask. A plastic-looking black mask with a series of holes running down the middle, black round glasses, and slick black hair. He never spoke a word to Brian. Didn't even ask what he wanted. All he remembered was standing 1 minute and then sitting the next. He received his tattoo and was nudged out the door, where eventually, he found his way home. Jolting awake in a pain haze, after recounting his wild night, he finally came to and realized just what he'd done and hesitantly took a peek at his right arm where the tattoo had been etched in. It was on the upper portion of his arm just below the shoulder and it still stung a bit, but when he saw it more clearly, he was amazed to find out it actually looked pretty good. He wasn't for sure if it was his style, but it looked cool nevertheless. The centerpiece was a screaming skull with dripping flesh and muscle melting off of its face while some type of bug, a centipede Brian thought, curved in and out of the skull's orifices. The bug was black and red with a large set of pincers on one end. Gross, but cool, he thought as was flexing his arm in the mirror. As he flexed, he could feel it sting and he winced a bit but not much. The art itself seemed to ride off of the skin more than a usual tattoo would, but Brian didn't know much about them, so he figured it was normal. Luckily, he was off from work for the next couple of days and planned his drinking nights responsibly but would have called in anyway because he felt ill. It came on slow at first, but eventually, after the first day, he started to get sick by just looking at food and seemed to have a fever. Because he was an introvert and didn't like going to the hospital, he dealt with the pain and suffering all on his own. He told himself multiple times, hoping would pass soon but it hadn't. On the third day, he decided he'd use some of what vacation time to get some well-deserved rest and to see if he could suppress this god-awful sickness. By the fourth day, he became so drained of any energy that all he could do was lie in bed. Later that night, he awoke to the sound of something. Half asleep, he tried to decipher it, but only ended up falling back asleep from exhaustion. In the morning, he wondered what it was that he heard. It sounded like a scuttling noise of some sort, but also like the stirring of pasta in a big pot. It was unsettling to think about but easy to brush off considering the side effects of his sickness. The next day he stepped on a scale in his bathroom where he discovered he'd lost 40 pounds. That wasn't normal, even he knew that, but still, he decided it would be over soon and kept self-medicating, hoping it would help and that he could put this behind him soon. After day 6, he couldn't bear the pain any longer and was going to leave, but again decided not to. He couldn't understand why he wasn't able to bring himself to leave the confines of his house, but every time he tried, he wasn't able to. It was like something was holding him back. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he felt the urge to vomit. It hit him so strongly that he nearly didn't make it to the toilet, but when he finally let it out, he was horrified. Floating around in the now tainted water was blood. A very large amount of blood. So much blood in fact that he thought he might die right there on the spot. There were chunks of something in the water, but he couldn't tell what they were. Just dark red forms that closely resembled organs, but he wasn't for sure. He let out, or at least he tried to let out, a whimpering scream at the sight, but only found himself frozen in fear looming at the jumbled mess of blood and guts. What he did scream at, however, was the stinging pain he felt in his right arm. It felt like something had sunk its fangs down deep within his muscles. Then he thought of it. It couldn't be. It's not possible, he thought as he rose up from the floor to peer at the tattoo. The woman's words rang in his head, filling it with the crackles and half-spoken words that he could only remember in broken sections, yet still, they filled him. After staring at his face in the mirror, studying his pale skin and sunken eyes while trying to stall time before he had to look at his arm, he saw it. There it was, as it had been on the first day, but now the pincers of the bug were hidden under his skin. With widened eyes, his breath became frantic, coming and going in short bursts. Then came the first visible movement. All of the legs at once started to wriggle and writhe madly and randomly. Dropping backward out of pure astonishment, he fell onto the bathroom floor. As he watched it, gaping in horror, he started to hear the same sound as the previous night. A fast scuttling noise and the unpleasant pasta stirring noise that followed it. Only now had he realized what the sound was. It was a bug. It sounded as if it were crawling in his ear and through his head. He couldn't place it, but for some reason, he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do, which was a jab of something sharp in his ear or slice away the skin where the bug was. It was like he wasn't in control of his own limbs. That's when he felt himself hair up off the floor, again going to the mirror. He felt as if he were being moved by a large rope on the inside as his emancipated body began to pull itself off the ground to stare in the mirror again. B wooed his mouth wife and stared at something moving in the back of his throat. Two string-like things began protruding from the back of his esophagus, followed shortly by the head of a large bug. Two large pincers began to spread wide along with the bug's mouth as it made an evil hiss just before Brian screamed and fainted from fright. He awoke sometime later, only now, it was dark outside, and he was lying in his bed. Just a dream, he though. A horrible nasty dream. Only it wasn't a dream, he thought. He quickly realized this as he tried to move but couldn't. And again, he heard the loathsome crawling and painful stinging from inside himself. He lied there, unable to scream, unable to move, and suffered his fate. He had not run his vacation time out and nobody else cared about for him, so it took his boss another week before he became worried about him. He never called in before or made a no-call no-show, so B thought it odd. After asking the police to send a unit out to check on him, they arrived on the scene and assessed the ER. The small house exterior seemed okay, but overgrown and the car had a considerable amount of dust on it. There were also used liquor bottles scattered near the front door. The police entered after a few moments of knocking and the door opened up slowly, as if it had not even shut in the first place. The smell was awful. There were rats and various bugs crawling around the place and molded food sitting on the table as well as in the sink. The officers' hands immediately were drawn to their faces to mask, or try to mask, the horrid scent. They neared Brian's room, the scent growing even stronger, and that's when they saw him. He was lying in his bed, sprawled out and unmoving, dead and rotting. B was overrun by bugs and rats galore, and only when the officers shooed the vermins did they see Brian in full. His skull was showing clear as day, mouth open as if he was screaming at them, and flesh with bits of muscle seemed to drip from the jaw. Just like the tattoo. The tattoo they could not see. Not because it had deteriorated away, but because it had been completely removed. Sliced off the arm like a piece of ham at Thanksgiving dinner. When asked about any possible sightings to the neighbors, a man a few houses down from Brian's have a strange report. He said a thin man with a black mask, glasses, and slick black hair appeared and left his house with a large suitcase.
Right?
This has been, he said as he recounted his memory of the man leaving. The Kavazana. Be sure to go give some love. The story itself will be linked in the episode description. Till next time, bye bye.